Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 20. Let me start off by saying I'm so happy to be sitting down recording today. I think last week, or my last episode, was a bit daunting because I hadn't recorded in a while, but I'm really happy to be back into the flow of things, into a regular upload schedule, so I hope you enjoy this episode. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers since the last upload. I know I put out an appeal to reach 4,000 subscribers before I hit my 1-year anniversary on YouTube. To be honest, I didn't expect it to work as well as it did. If you are new here, welcome. As I said, my name is Michaela. I am a knitter from Dublin, Ireland. I've been knitting for about 2.5 years now, I think, and I was crocheting for a bit beforehand. And here I just have a very standard knitting podcast channel where I talk about all of my projects that I've recently finished, what I'm currently working on. Sometimes I talk about upcoming plans, any new yarn acquisitions or yarn related acquisitions that I got, and I try to upload every 2 or 3 weeks. So if you are new here, thank you very much for joining, thank you for subscribing, you're very welcome, and I really appreciate the support. I do find it hard to believe that all of the subscribers that I gained since the last podcast episode came from just me asking, so I feel like someone might have mentioned my channel or something somewhere. So if you are here based on a recommendation from another YouTuber or someone on Instagram or something that you enjoy, please do let me know so I can go and check them out myself. And we are now much closer to 4,000 subscribers, and I still haven't reached my 1-year anniversary on YouTube. So actually, I'm going to check what the date is right now. Okay, so my first upload was March 18th, 2024, which is only about 2 weeks away. So I don't know if I'll get to 4,000 before that. If I do, that would be amazing. If not, it's completely fine. But if you are not subscribed yet and you enjoy my content, please do consider clicking the subscribe button, especially if this is your second or third time watching. I think from my analytics, I can see that there are some returning viewers who haven't subscribed. So if that is you and you'd like to give my channel a chance, I would really appreciate it. And if you change your mind later, you can always unsubscribe. And with all that out of the way, let's just get into the video. So I have 1 finished object today and 3 whips. And my finished object is, of course, what I'm wearing, which is my Levitate Wrap, which is a pattern by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I will put in some B-roll footage right here so you can see. Am I blurry? No, I'm not. I will put in some B-roll footage so you can see what it looks like on, but I was very close to finishing this in the last episode, so I'm not surprised that it's a finished object for today. So back to basics again, this is a wrap cardigan design by My Favourite Things Knitwear. The yarn that I'm using is Mode at Rowan Softest Alpaca in the colour Ash Grey, which was gifted to me by Mode at Rowan. It is 70% alpaca, 7% wool and 23% polyamide. And I was actually watching Amy from Knits the other day, and she was using a yarn, I can't remember what it was called. Was it originally Lovely Fluff, maybe? Which I haven't used, but when she read out the composition, I realised that they're pretty much exactly the same. I think instead of polyamide, that one has nylon, but the percentages are all the same, and nylon and polyamide would be quite similar in their qualities. So if you've used originally Lovely Fluff, I imagine this feels absolutely identical. To me, it feels very similar to Camarosa Snefnug as well. And it's 130 metres in 50 grams. The gauge for this pattern is 15 stitches and 10 centimetres. My gauge was 17 stitches and 10 centimetres, so pretty significant. When I swatched before starting, I did think that I was much closer to gauge than I am, but I'm actually quite happy with the gauge. I think the density of the fabric is really nice, and it's a little bit smaller, I guess, than what it would have been if I had met gauge, and I kind of like that. I've decided that I didn't really want the oversized look with this wrap cardigan. As I was knitting it, I wasn't too sure what fit I wanted. I didn't know if I'd wanted oversized or more fitted, but I'm so happy with the way it's turned out. You can see that there's not a lot of positive ease in the sleeve, and I'm actually really happy with that. The sleeve turned out exactly how I hoped it would. There's about, I would say, 2 inches positive ease there. There's definitely a bit more positive ease in the body, but I think the double knit band at the bottom, which pulls everything in, gives a bit of waist shaping. It just really streamlines the whole thing and makes it look a lot more tailored and fitted, which I really love. In the last episode, I had almost finished 1 sleeve and I hadn't started the second one. So I did mention that I was going to knit the sleeve shorter than indicated in the pattern, because based on some mid-project blocks that I had done up until that point, I knew that this fabric stretched a lot in length, and I was correct. So the sleeve length, I actually didn't get any footage of the sleeve length before blocking, but it was probably about halfway up my forearm, and now it's just past my wrist. It's not reaching down to my hand, but it is just at my wrist bone or just past my wrist bone. I really like the cuff details on this cardigan. It's a folded down sewn cuff. So basically, once you reach this desired sleeve length minus the cuff, you actually go down a needle size and you knit a good bit in stockinette, and then you fold it down and you sew it down to the inside. When I went down a needle size, I inserted a thread of a contrasting colour yarn throughout that round, so that when I was sewing it down later, I would easily see which round I was sewing it to. I think it's actually recommended in the pattern to do that, if I remember correctly. I've knit this kind of cuff a few times and also on the hem of bodies, and I always find it helpful to kind of mark that round so you know which round you're supposed to be attaching your bind off edge to, although you don't bind off, you just sew it down. Although some people do bind off and then sew it down, I prefer to sew it down almost like, it's almost kind of like a grafting motion where you kind of pull the yarn through the first stitch on the needle knitwise and you slip it off, and then you go through almost like a duplicate stitch, you go through the stitch in the fabric, so in the row that you want to attach it to, and then you pull the yarn through the next stitch on your needle. I'm not explaining it very well. I'll link the tutorial down below that I used before for this method, and I pretty much use all the time whenever I have to sew down an edge like this. But yeah, I did sew it down, and then I realized that I didn't really like how it was looking. It was kind of flaring outwards this way, which would imply to me that it was attached too high up, like too close to the cuff, and it needed to be attached to a row lower down. So I actually unpicked it and reattached it to the next row down, and I think it looks much better now. Given this kind of fluffy nature of the yarn, it was actually quite difficult to both sew it down and to unpick it, because I couldn't really see what I was doing. I couldn't see the stitches clearly, and I couldn't see the yarn clearly and this kind of thing, but I did get there in the end, and then I just copied it on the second sleeve, and yeah, I'm really happy with how it turned out. The pattern tells you to attach snap fasteners to the inside of the cardigan, which I think is a great idea because it does keep everything in place when you're wearing it. I actually did have snap fasteners already, which surprised me, but I bought them years ago, well, maybe not, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, when I was designing crochet patterns, and I had an idea for a crochet pattern that required snap fasteners. I never got around to designing that pattern, so those fasteners lay unused in my knitting bag, but they did come in handy eventually. So yeah, I attached those. They were a bit finicky to attach, but overall quite quick. However, I do think I'm going to adjust the position, because the one on the right hand side, I think I put it, yeah, I just positioned it wrong, and it's kind of pulling the wrap. I'll put in some b-roll footage, but basically when it's closed, it just pulls on the fabric at the front in quite a noticeable way. So I probably will end up taking off one half of those fasteners and just readjusting the position. So right now I have this fastener closed. Actually, I'll show you where it is. So that lines up pretty nicely. I was trying to figure out the fastener location based on where it naturally sits when I tie it, but I also think I did put this tie in the right position, but I think it would look better if it was a little bit more forward, maybe even just an inch. Will I undo it and reattach it? Maybe. I might just change this fastener location first and see what difference that makes. I so far have been wearing this without this one closed, because you can see that they are not lined up at all. So I would need to move this one to here, because when I do close it, you can see very clearly that it's pulling on the fabric, and I don't like how it looks for understandable reasons. So I kind of just wear it like this. Luckily the section underneath doesn't actually peek out or anything, so I don't think it makes a huge difference, but I would like to be able to close it anyway, so I might just change the fastener location. The other thing though is that you can see that this hem sits right here, and then when I lift it up, the lower hem is actually about an inch above that, and I can pull it down and snap it closed. I just wonder if that would affect the fit of the double knit band here, but I think I'll just for now move the fastener and wear it closed and see if I like it. I think that will solve most of the issue, and then I'll just have to decide if I want to change the location of the tie or not. At the moment I'm also wearing the tie, I'll just tie it now. So I do a regular knot, and then I go as if to tie it in a bow, but I actually pull that loop the whole way through. So I have one loop here and then just the two long ends, and I kind of like how that looks. I think the bow would be nice, except the ends would be too short, and I wanted something a little bit tighter looking than just having it tied once. So I have worn this to work. The sleeves are a tiny bit shorter than I would typically go for, but I suppose my longer sleeves are on my kind of oversized longer jumpers, whereas this is obviously cropped and it's a little bit more fitted as well, and even the sleeves themselves are a little bit more fitted. They don't have as much ease as some of my other jumpers, so I think the shorter sleeve length actually suits this style really well. I did talk about the body length a lot in the last few episodes, and I am happy with it, but it's definitely at the lower end of the range that I would be happy with, if that makes sense. So it couldn't be any shorter, but it could be 1 or 2 centimeters longer and I'd still be happy with it. However, the fact that I am happy with it means I'm obviously going to leave it. even if I wasn't, I don't see myself undoing all of that double knitting. I would wear this with high-waisted jeans. I pretty much exclusively wear high-waisted jeans because I am a millennial through and through. So I would wear this with high-waisted jeans, and I have worn it with high-waisted jeans, although those particular jeans, the waistband is kind of going on them, so they're not really high-waisted anymore. But yeah, I definitely think that this is an excellent addition to my wardrobe. I could also see myself wearing it with some of my spring or summer dresses. I don't have a lot of those, but I definitely have one or two that I can picture right now that this would look really nice with. I would actually make this again. I would probably make it a little bit longer just so it sits more comfortably in that range of a length that I would be happy with. But otherwise I wouldn't change anything. I'm actually really happy with it. In terms of the yarn usage, I used 5.8 balls of That Softest Alpaca yarn, which is 291 grams or 755 meters. For my size, the pattern calls for 875 meters. So just a little bit less than what's recommended. It does mean that I have over 4 balls left of this yarn because I received 10, and I'll probably make a Sophie scarf out of those next winter. I know, incredibly basic, but I actually don't have any neutral coloured scarves, so, and I think this fabric, like the softness of this yarn would just be incredible around my neck, so that's something that I can look forward to next winter. And that was my only finished object, so we will move on to whips. And my first one is my Toivoharju socks, which is a pattern by Heidi Alander. The yarn that I'm using is from Luhatarn Luola, which is a Finnish yarn dyeing brand, and the base is called Vainamoinen. The colour is Utu, and it's just 100% wool. It doesn't say what kind of wool, it's just 100% wool. I'm hoping these will hold up without the addition of a nylon or a synthetic fibre in there. They do feel quite rustic, so I don't know if that will lend to a more durable sock. I'm not sure how wool composition works in that regard, so I might be eating my words, but hopefully they hold up okay. None of my socks that I've made have any holes in them, and I do wear my socks quite a lot. However, I'm pretty sure they all have nylon or something in them. So these will be my first pair of socks without nylon, and we're just going to hope for the best. So I just put these in a blocker so you can actually see the lace pattern kind of stretched out there. I have finished the gusset on both socks, and I actually decreased every third row instead of every second for the gusset, because when I was trying these on after finishing the leg, they felt quite tight. Very difficult to get on, but once they're on, they're just really, really snug. But I didn't want any discomfort around my instep. I do have quite a high instep, so I decided to decrease every third round instead of every second. And I've tried them on, and I can definitely feel the extra room, but so far it's not too much. I'm a little bit concerned about it growing when blocking and possibly being too big, but we'll see. I know the obvious answer is to block them now and try them on and see, but they're just socks. And at the end of the day, if they're too big for me to wear outside of the house, I'll wear them at home. And I'm not someone who shows off my socks when I wear them, so it wouldn't bother me that I couldn't wear them outside the house. I just like to wear knit socks for the feeling and the knowledge that I have these beautiful lace socks on my feet. So it wouldn't bother me if I could only wear these at home. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I was starting to resent these just a tiny bit because I was enjoying my other knit projects a lot more, and I didn't want to have to work on these, or I didn't want to feel obliged to work on these. But after trying them on and falling in love with how they look on my feet, I've gotten a bit of a second wind, and I'm really looking forward to finishing them now. The lace pattern is supposed to taper at the end of the foot, which is an effect that I really like, and kind of forgot that it was in this pattern. So when I was knitting the foot, I just kind of kept knitting the lace pattern, and my assumption was that I should just do what I do for every other sock, which is knit the foot until it's 19.5 centimeters from the back of the heel, and then start to toe. But I then remembered that the lace pattern tapers, and I thought, oh, I should probably check the pattern because I'm probably supposed to stop the lace pattern earlier so that I can start that tapering effect. And lo and behold, I was correct. So I had already knit past the point at which I was supposed to stop. So I had to tink back 3 rounds. I'm usually too lazy to tink. I'll nearly always take my needle out and insert it at the correct row in all the stitches around, and then just rip out the yarn. But I didn't want to risk that with the lace pattern because I would find it way too difficult to figure out which stitch I'm supposed to be inserting my needle into, and I would definitely end up making a dog's dinner of it. So I just tinked back, which, didn't take too long anyway, so it wasn't that big a deal. And now I'm actually ready to start the taper on this sock. And on this sock, I've literally just finished the gusset decreases, so I just have to work the foot now. But I only have to work, I think, about 30 rounds before I start that tapering. So really not too far to go on this one either, and hopefully I will have these done very, very soon. I also realised that I have been making 2 mistakes in the lace pattern. The first one is that every now and again there's a point at which you're supposed to decrease 2 stitches, and one of the methods used on one side of the sock is a knit 2 together, and on the other side it's I can't remember, I think it's like slip, knit 2 together and pass slip stitch over or something like that. Basically, I did not look at the chart properly, and instead of working that slip, knit 2 together and pass slip stitch over, like, I could be completely wrong with that. I have been slipping 2 stitches, knitting the next one and passing 2 slip stitches over, which is nothing like what you're supposed to be doing, and I don't know how I ended up doing that. I could have sworn, actually I did. I know I checked the chart when I got to that round, obviously, because I wouldn't have just known to do that. So I checked the chart, I checked the abbreviations, and I remember working that for the first time and being like, is this right? Am I doing this right? And like, no, I wasn't doing it right. And it clearly says in the pattern is not confusing. It clearly says what you're supposed to do. Because when I went back to look at it, just like yesterday, I was like, okay, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Why am I doing something completely different? So I don't know. The other mistake is that, so the chart has a symbol for decreasing those 2 stitches, and one's going right and one's going left. And I basically didn't notice that one was going right and one was going left. So that decrease that I'm doing, that slip, slip, knit, and then passing slip stitches over, I'm doing that for both sides. Instead of doing a knit 3 together on one side and the slip, knit, whatever it is, on the other side, I'm doing my own version of a decrease for both of them. So basically it means that if I have a row of stitches that are going up like this, in the middle, where there's a decrease, the right stitch is overlapping, or the whatever side this is on the video, it's overlapping, so it's kind of cutting in that line of stitches, whereas this should be the stitch on top, so that it's just a smooth, uninterrupted diagonal line. I hope that makes sense, but yeah, such a subtle mistake. It doesn't bother me enough to undo the sock, absolutely not, so it's going to stay. Very warm in here, so I took my Levitate Wrap off. My next whip is my Monday sweater, which is a pattern by Petite Knit. This is a very plain raglan stockinette in the round jumper, and the yarn that I'm using is Pigment and Ply sock yarn, and the colour is a development colourway. She called it Midnight's Development, so I think it's from the Taylor Swift collection, and I'm holding it with Filca Tilia in the colour Freesia, which is a light purple colour. That's the mohair on its own, and this is the fingering weight yarn on its own. And then combined, they look like this. One thing I forgot to mention in the last episode is that I am using helical knitting with this, just to make sure that there's no pooling, especially because these were development colorways. They could have been from different dye lots or different batches, and I just wanted to make sure that everything was quite smooth and seamless, no pooling, no obvious color blocking. And I think it's working out fantastically. I am so thrilled with how the colours are working up together. I'm knitting a size medium. The pattern gauge is 21 stitches and 10 centimeters. My gauge is 20.5 stitches and 10 centimeters after blocking. Another thing I forgot to mention in my last episode is that I got 3 skeins of this Pigment and Ply yarn, and when I went to cake the first one up, the hank itself was wound really loosely. It's the only way I can describe it. Like it was sitting on my Swift, and certain strands of the yarn were quite tight around the Swift, but other strands were hanging off the Swift in big loops, so it was almost like there was like uneven tension when it was being wound into a hank or something. I don't know what happened, but basically it got really tangled when I was trying to cake it up, and I had to sacrifice some of it. So I did buy 3 skeins, and I think of that tangled skein I managed to salvage about 70 to 80 grams, and it was 110 grams to begin with, so it was quite a generous skein, and I got most of it out of it, so it's fine. But when I first started this jumper, I was a bit concerned about the fact that I didn't have exactly 1200 grams of yarn. I had just under. So, but judging where we are at the moment, I don't think I would need all 3 skeins, so crisis averted. And I did keep the tangled section in case I really, really needed it. I would just sit down and untangle it, but thankfully I don't think I'm going to need it. In my last episode, I talked about the double knit rounds around the collar, and I had some really interesting comments from people. There was actually 1 or 2 people who said that they were also confused by the double knit rounds, that they don't understand how it's supposed to make it fold. But a few other people said that the double knit rounds are supposed to not necessarily encourage the fold to happen, but just make the fold look more crisp and neat. And I have to admit that I do think it has that effect. So maybe that's the reason. Maybe I was overthinking it a bit. I think for this kind of instance where you're sewing it down, you don't necessarily need something to force it to fold, because it being sewn down is of course going to make it fold here. It is nice to have those double knit rounds to make the fold look more crisp, but for example, if I were to knit a beanie with a 1x1 rib, I would do the double knit rounds the way that I mentioned, where you repeat the round 2 or 3 times instead of alternating the double knit stitches. In the last episode, I think I had just joined under the arms, so obviously I've made some decent progress on it. I did work most of the body, and I stopped when I thought I needed to start the ribbing, and I started the sleeve then, and I did the same. I stopped when I thought I needed to add the ribbing, and at that point I blocked it just to check how much length there was going to be in the sleeves and in the body. So it did grow a lot, especially in the width. And just to recap, in the last episode I mentioned that I had already started this pattern, but I misread the pattern gauge and I was knitting at way too tight a gauge, so it was too small, so I had to restart, and now my gauge is much closer to pattern gauge. It's, as I mentioned, 20.5 stitches in 10 centimeters instead of the 21 stitches that the pattern calls for. And it also fits me, but it has a lot more positive ease than I intended. It's got about 10 inches of positive ease, whereas the pattern says it should be between 6 to 8. With the size that I was going for, the size medium, that should have given me 8 inches, so it is 2 inches bigger than it's supposed to be. I'm not too fussed about getting the exact right gauge on this pattern, to be honest. It's a very low effort project for me, something oversized, slouchy, comfortable, and more importantly, something very, very mindless to work on. When I was working the sleeve decreases, I thought the sleeve was going to be too short, just with how frequently they were happening. I kind of calculated that it would only reach about halfway up my forearm before adding the ribbing. So I thought I would have to add a lot more rows of plain stockinette after the last decrease. But with the growth after blocking, I actually only had to add 12 rounds of plain stockinette, so nothing too extreme. And then you have quite a long ribbing section for the cuff. Mine is, I think, 10 centimeters, 10 or 11 centimeters. I've talked about this a lot before, so I must sound like a broken record, but if you're new here, my 1x1 ribbing generally looks quite untidy. My knit stitches tend to go really wide, and my purl stitches go really tight, and I just hate how it looks. I usually do a German short row turn and work my ribbing on the wrong side because it looks so much neater that way, on the outside then. But for this one, I wanted to try something new, so I actually did Norwegian purling for the purl stitches when I was working this ribbing. For the first 4 rows, I just did my regular rib, and then I decided I really hate how this looks. I'm going to try Norwegian purling, so that's what I did, and it doesn't look like it on camera, but I can see a very, very slight difference in how the ribbing looks overall. And it's not like previously it was so extreme that even blocking wouldn't help it, but I'm kind of hopeful that blocking and just general wear will make this look better over time. I also think because this is a new technique for me, that if it still looks messy, it could just be down to learning how to hold my yarn more comfortably when I'm Norwegian purling, or how to tension it properly and things like this. So hopefully with time that will even out and look a lot better. Because I want to make sure that I have enough yarn, I did weigh the amount of yarn that the sleeve used, and it used 40 grams of the fingering weight yarn. I didn't weigh the mohair, but the equivalent length would be about 20 grams because it's half the weight. So that's just a fun fact. And I am still timing myself using the My Row Counter app. So far I've put in about 24 hours, I think. And I just have the body ribbing left to do. I actually think I'm going to take out a few rows of the body because it grew so much with blocking. So I like my jumpers to kind of hit just the bottom of my pocket here. And with this pattern, it calls for 9 centimeters of ribbing, which would probably put it a little bit lower than that, maybe around here. So I might just rip out a couple of rows of the body because I do want to have long ribbing. If I just knit ribbing until there, I think that would be too short for my preference. So yeah, I might just undo a couple of rows here and then restart the ribbing. My guess at this point is that I'll put in that this will take 40 hours of knitting. So we'll see how close I am, but that's just my estimate at the moment. I think the body ribbing will take me longer than I expect. Oh, also I did do a tubular bind off for the sleeve, and I'll do a tubular bind off for all the other ribbing features. But yeah, so that's my Monday sweater. I'm really eager to keep up the momentum on this. I'm still enjoying it. I think when I blocked it, I kind of put it to the side for a while just because at that point then I was a little bit more involved in other projects and my interest was just elsewhere. But now I'm eager to kind of keep going on it. I am desperate to cast on my April cardigan, which I mentioned in my last video. I am surrounded by yellow at the moment. Everyone I know is wearing yellow. People I follow on Instagram and YouTube are all knitting with yellow. So I'm really eager to start working with yellow myself. And yeah, so I'm dying to cast on my April cardigan, but I'm not allowing myself to do that until I finish this. So hopefully in the next maybe week or so, I'll get this done. I have already decided that I'm going to make more of these. As I said, this particular one is quite a low effort, low stakes project, but I would love to make more where I put more thought into getting the gauge right, getting the sizing right. I would like to make it the fabric a bit denser, and I would also like to have less positive ease. So I would aim for in between those 6 to 8 inches while also having a denser fabric. It's funny because, as I said in my last episode, I talked about how I had already started this at a tighter gauge, and I didn't want to frog it all, obviously, because I had reached the point at which I split for the sleeve and the body, and so I'd put a lot of work into it at that point, and I was trying to figure out if I could get away with just continuing at that gauge and adjusting the size accordingly, but I didn't think I would have enough yarn. But judging by how this one is going in terms of the yarn usage, I could potentially have gotten away with it. I'm not too sure. I'll have to figure it out exactly when I actually finish this. But that is something that I would keep in mind in the future. Although I do think that one was still a little bit too tight of a gauge. I probably would have rather continue with it than frog it all and start all over again. But look, we're here now. We've got an early finished jumper and I really like how it looks. And we are now on my last whip. I feel like I haven't been recording for that long, so either this is going to be a short episode or I've just gotten back into the swing of recording after my short break. But this is very difficult to see. It's the Dagmar zipper sweater by Petite Knit, or the beginnings of one at least. The yarn that I'm using is Kjelholt Ullspinnery Kjelholt Triple. This is a Danish yarn that contains wool from the Kjelholt Ullspinnery sheep and also Gotland fur and merino wool. I don't know the exact percentages, but those are the yarns that are in there. It's an Aran weight yarn. It's quite rustic, but it's definitely softer than I expected it to feel. And it's 165 meters in 100 grams. This is the yarn that Petite Knit used for all of her Dagmar patterns. So the sweater, the jacket and the zipper sweater. And I received it as a birthday present from my friends and I'm just really, really enjoying working with it. There's 2 different gauges given by the pattern. There's one for the honeycomb stitch and one for the seed stitch. I just swatched in the honeycomb stitch and I got gauge, which is 24 stitches and 24 rows in 10 centimeters. I figured that there's no point swatching for 2 different stitches because I'm not going to be using 2 different size needles. I'm just not going to do that. So I'll figure it out. I'm about to start a seed stitch section, so I'll see how it goes once I get there. But yeah, at the moment I have just been working on the back panel. I've been working increases and I only have a few more increase rows left to do before I just knit the rest of the back panel straight. This being black yarn, I was kind of worried when I first started that the cables wouldn't be very visible, but I think it looks really good in Petite Knit's sample. She knit the Dagmar sweater in this colour. I'll put a photo up so you can see, but I think the cables look fine. So even though I was knitting it and I was like, it's kind of difficult to see, I think when it's finished, it'll look really, really good. I was kind of inspired by Amy from Knee Knit's zipper sweater. She just did the plain zipper sweater by Petite Knit and she knit it in a black colour. And originally I was actually, before the Dagmar zipper sweater came out, I was going to knit that at some point in the black colour. But then when the zipper sweater came out, I thought, well, maybe I can do something different. Still do a zipper sweater, still do it in black, but it's got all these lovely cables now. This, of course, is a very, very involved knit. There's a couple of different cables, and at the moment, obviously with the increases as well, I'm finding that I have to check the chart for every single row, which is just taking a lot of time and energy, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm finding it quite difficult to put down. Sorry about the needles clanking, but it is what I would consider to be a laptop knit. So, you know, there's these memes about millennials having to do certain things on a laptop, like book flights. This is the kind of pattern that I need to be doing on the laptop. I wouldn't dream of trying to follow this pattern on my phone. I just couldn't do it. So I've actually printed it out. But for a while I was just using my laptop and I had 3 windows open. One had the chart for the back panel, one had the key for the chart, and one had the actual instructions for how to work each cable. So I would look at the chart and I would see the little cable symbol, I'd go to the key to see what kind of cable it was, and then I'd go up to the instructions to see how to work that cable. So I've definitely gotten better at it. I'm at a point now where I can read the cables at least, and I can know how to work the next cable row, However, with the increases, I do need to look at the chart because some of them are done as a knit stitch and some are done as a purl stitch, and I can't predict. I'm just not able to predict which one it's going to be. She does have instructions for make one knit and make one purl, but then there's, sorry, no, it's make one left knit, make one right knit, make one left purl, make one right purl. And for each one, she has instructions on how to do it on both the right side and the wrong side. So it's kind of a lot, and I don't think I've ever worked a pattern. Actually, I do think the Monday sweater had the same thing, but again, that's also a petite knit pattern. Before the Monday sweater, I'd never worked a pattern that had that long a list of instructions for just the make one stitches, because I've only ever worked make one left or make one right. Basically, I think the instructions that I've used before for make one left to make one right have been a lot simpler, whereas in this pattern, for the increases alone, there's 8 lines of instructions. So you got 4 different increases, you know, 2 knits, 2 purls, 2 left, 2 right, and you've got right and wrong side. So it's just a lot, and I think it's good. I think it's good that it's explained so clearly. But at least for me, I think I've kind of regressed in my make one knowledge now, because I think I always kind of intuited how to work a make one knit on the wrong side, for example. Whereas now I find myself second guessing things, where in the sense that it will tell me make one left knit and I'll be on the wrong side, and I'll assume that it's like a make one left, but you purl it instead of knitting it, so it looks like a knit stitch on the right side. But I find myself going to the instructions to double check, which is not a bad thing at all. I'm just looking forward to either not having to second guess myself or just being done with the increases, so I don't have to refer back to so I don't have to think too much about the increases anymore, because as I said, I can read the cables at this point, and I feel like once I finish the increases, I'll be flying. But for now, I do find myself checking every single row. So yeah, I do only have like 4 rows of increases left to do. I make it sound like I've got a mountain of increases left. I've only got 4 increase rows left, and then I could start knitting the cable section without any increases. I should also mention that I am knitting this with Ode from Baubles and Berries. Before Christmas, we decided that we were going to cast this on together, but we also decided to wait until March. So I've obviously cast mine on, and she cast hers on. I think during the week she sent me a photo, and we're pretty much at the same point. So yeah, it's been really nice to kind of have someone to talk to about it, and she says the same thing, that the increases are very involved and she can't wait to get the increases out of the way so she can just focus on reading her knitting to work the cables. Yeah, I have printed it out now, so I don't need to look at my laptop screen anymore. I'm finding it hard to put this down, but I do want to prioritize my other projects. You know, my other 2 whips are quite close to completion, so I want to prioritize getting those done, and then I'll be able to focus on this one more. But I am really enjoying it. Thought I had something else I wanted to say, but I seem to have completely forgotten about it. It'll probably come back to me afterwards and I'll be really annoyed at myself. Yeah, okay, I think that's it then. I don't have anything to discuss in the way of plans, because I talked about all my plans in the last episode. And that is everything for today. I feel like that was definitely a shorter episode than usual, or else, as I said, I've just gotten back into the swing of recording. I have been recording for about an hour, so we'll see how much footage I actually get out of this. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, or leave a comment down below. If you have any questions, if you want to know anything about anything that I talked about, do feel free to leave it down in the comments. Of course, if you're not subscribed and you want to see more content like this, please do consider hitting that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. But otherwise, I will just see you in the next video. Bye!